Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic? Let's do it. What's the creepiest experience you've ever had that you can't explain? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. A few years ago, I was drinking at a friend's house. I couldn't drive home, so I slept on the couch. I had a strange dream that I had saved a young boy from being hit by a truck just down the road from my friend's house. When I woke up, a young boy had been hit and killed by a truck in the exact spot that I had dreamed of. My dad died about a month and a half ago, and the night he died, I was coming back on an evening hike, and I could have sworn someone was watching me. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was so weird. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and my dog kept looking around half scared. I found out my dad had passed a few hours later when I woke up the next morning. I was chilling at my friend's grandmother's house when he fell asleep, so I got up to leave, and the bedroom door opened by itself, and I heard the electric keyboard downstairs play a few keys. I sat down, smoked a cigarette, and plucked up the courage to go downstairs. I turned the light on and saw the dog hiding under the table. I checked if the keyboard was on, and it was unplugged. Disclaimer, not religious or spiritual. I had a shadow man that lived in the hall of the first house I purchased, though I think he actually lived in the attic. When we bought the house, I popped my head into the attic to see if there was anything up there, and two hands forcibly pushed down on my shoulders. I never went up there again, and even my ex-husband wouldn't go up there after his first trip, though he just said it was too hot and I was being stupid. It was mostly benign, just a shadow man at the end of the hall or right outside the bedroom door. Nothing awful, but definitely creepy. Even though I was in my 30s, I'd catch a random urge to run my bedroom and jump into bed, so nothing grabbed my ankles, but it was what it was. The oddest thing was that my thermostat would move itself to either max out the high temperature if the AC was on, or on low temperature if the heat was on. After waking up to the house at barely 50 degrees several nights in a row, I upgraded from the old school top lever to a digital thermostat. I still had the issue. An electrician came in and couldn't diagnose the issue. It was just the shadow man being a dick. I was glad when I moved away. When I was a child, I lived with my grandmother along with my older sister. While my grandmother was away on a trip to Florida, my sisters and I were just hanging out in the basement when we heard our grandmother's voice coming from upstairs yelling out our names, like she was calling out to us. I just remember looking at each other shocked as we went silent for a couple of seconds. We were both thinking the same thing. Did you seriously just hear that? I'll never forget how clear it was, the voice calling out to us, the familiarity of the voice as it sounded identical to our grandmother, and how she would call out our name like that. A couple days later, we get notified that our grandmother fell ill and had to be taken to a hospital, and from there, she was transported back home where she got diagnosed with stage 3 lung cancer. She died 6 months later. I'll always wonder what in the world happened. Did we get some sort of warning something was going to happen to our grandmother? I was staying at my sister's when I was 14 and had a horrible nightmare about being strangled by the devil. I could only see his face smiling at me and feel a crushing sensation in my throat. I told him to F off and swung a punch, and I then woke up. I looked over and it was about 1 a.m. The next morning, my sister was complaining that she had a really horrible nightmare and that the devil was strangling her. I asked her what time it happened, and she said, around 1 o'clock. I was attending church with my aunt when I was about 10 years old in a city about 20 miles from where I lived, and I was looking forward towards to the front, and in the front pew, I saw my friend's grandma, and she smiled and waved at me several times during the sermon. When we got back to my aunt's house, she asked me who I was waving at, and I told her Mrs. Bates. My aunt called several people from the church directory and asked if anyone saw someone in the front pew, and even the reverend said nobody was in the front pew. When my mother came to pick me up a few days later, we all found out Mrs. Bates died that Sunday morning getting ready for church. I tell people she made it to church. I'm a skeptic and an atheist. I believe in nothing. Not ghosts, not aliens, not psychic powers, so it makes it even creepier. Every now and then I know things I shouldn't. It's very rare, but it happens, and I've always chalked it up to luck or coincidence, except in this one case. My wife woke me up making noises in her sleep, like she was having a nightmare. While I woke her up, I saw a very distinct image in my head of 2 rows of rectangles moving right to left. I woke her up and asked if she was okay. She said, yeah, I had a nightmare, and I rolled over to go back to sleep. I got one of those weird feelings like I knew something I shouldn't, and I thought those rectangles had something to do with her dream, which is crazy. So I lay down to go back to sleep, but I knew that I was right. So I said, hey, I can't let this go. I know this may sound crazy, but did your dream have to do with 2 rows of rectangles moving across your face? She shot up and said, yes. I dreamt my mom and I were looking at photos in a photo album. The photos were 2 rows of old rectangle photos, and we were turning the pages, and I had a feeling someone was watching me from behind, and that's when you woke me up. I said, Jesus, was I the one watching you? And we were both just so freaked out that we started laughing, but we were both at a loss. Now again, I have to assume there is a logical explanation for this, but I can't say it was just a coincidence. That's just crazy. So to this day, I have no explanation, so I just try not to think about it. Maybe there was some transference of consciousness, living together, sleeping next to each other. Who knows? Pretty cool though either way, whether you believe it or not. I was working late in an office in my early 20s doing mass photocopying of documents to be sent out to bidders, back in the day when you used to send 200-page tender paper documents out instead of emailing them. Anyway, I was working away and the building started to literally vibrate. The wind noise outside was huge, and it just kept getting louder and louder. I finally decided, justifiably, that and I went to the back door and got ready to lock things behind me. All the while, the crescendo was getting louder and louder, and the whole place was basically reverberating with noise. I got to the back door, turned around, and the place went dead silent. I mean, from a level where you'd have to raise your voice to be heard to literally stone cold silence. Punched in the code, noped the F out of there, and have remembered the entire incident since. My aunt, Mom's sister, died very quickly from stage 4 breast cancer. She went from a cough to a scan to stage 4 breast cancer. She passed away in the morning of Bill Clinton's first inauguration at 44 years old. The family was in total shock. Mom said the only thing she remembered from that morning was how hideous Hillary Clinton's outfit was. Wake, funeral went by in a blur. She was buried in a cemetery in a freezing cold ground. My mother was haunted with dreams for years that she was desperately looking for her sister's grave and couldn't find her. She would scream to the sky, I can't find you if you don't help me find you, and wake up. Years later, I'm a preteen getting fitted for a bridesmaid dress near the cemetery, and Mom drives by it on the way home. She stopped the car and said, I have to go near the cemetery, and Mom drives by it on the way home. She's trying to tell me something. I have to go find her. It was late on a Saturday in the fall in New England, so the sun was going down at 3:30 p.m., closing the gates at 4 p.m. She asked the caretaker if he had a map, and he didn't. All she remembered from the burial 8 years later was that her sister was buried next to a tree. I swear we couldn't find a tree in the vast acreage of this cemetery. Mom was starting to get more and more panicked she couldn't find the grave. I said, Mom, why don't we come back next Saturday morning? We can look for it together in the light. She said, no, I can't. She brought me here and she's trying to tell me something. I need to find her. At this point, she was in tears. I said, ask her where she is. She looked at me funny, but knowing that we're similar people and there's no judgment, she said through tears, looking at the sky, Donna, I can't find you. I can't find you if you don't help me find you. I felt a wave of cold come over me. I looked down and I was standing directly on her grave. Donna, beloved wife and mother, and it was completely empty of flowers. 2 graves down was a freshly buried plot covered in pink roses, the symbol of breast cancer. Donna was the type of person who would make homemade wreaths for people on holidays and for housewarmings. Mom asked permission from the dead to take roses and make a wreath at Donna's grave for her. It's one of those things you believe but you don't. She never had dreams again, and told Donna's kids that their mom had been haunting her for years because no one came to visit her. Still gives me chills. I heard voices when I was a kid, around 6 to 8 years old. They were whispering non-intelligible things, but I knew by the tone of their voice and by their laughs that they were talking about me and mocking me, like I wasn't there. Adults have mean voices. It happened at night when I was in bed. I felt terribly strange in these moments. Most nights I would pee myself and freeze. I don't believe in paranormal shit. My mom did. I finally talked about it with her, and she put holy water from Lourdes at the corner of my room and demanded the voices go away. I never heard them anymore. I think I just needed a mom to protect me. I think I was in a state of transitioning between being awake and a state in sleep, and all my fears and pains were resurging. I was bullied at school, and assault and abuse began at home too. Mom was there, that's why they disappeared, but LMAO, that's off topic. I thought the topic was about something that never came back. Anyway, I wanted to tell it so. Mom had septic shock and wasn't going to make it. I sat with her when she was removed from life support and passed away. It was during COVID, so cremations were backed up. I was lying in bed making a mental note to call the next day about her cremation status. That night I had a dream that my mom called me on the phone. I lived far away, and we talked on the phone a lot. I was in shock and asked her how she was calling me. She died. She said, "It's okay. I'm happy here. I'm not in pain anymore." I woke up right then and felt a mix of relief and panic. The next morning I had an email from the night before. The funeral home had cremated her. There's a 3-hour time difference, and the email was sent just before I woke up from the dream. I'm convinced it was my mom's spirit finally being set free. I was around 16 at the time, and me and 3 friends were hanging out, and we missed the last train, so we called one of the girls' moms. We stayed at the entrance of the train station because of the safety, like CCTV, and it was fully lit up. I noticed a car that kept driving around the block, but didn't think of it as it was a very sketchy suburb and full of weirdos. The car eventually parked on the other side of the station, right near the elevator entrance. No one paid attention to it, so I just forgot about it. We were waiting until my friend's mom called us, telling us to meet her on the same side of the station in a few minutes. So we went across the station, and my friends insisted on using the elevator while I wanted to use the stairs, but I listened to them. We got to the elevator and pressed the button so it could come up to our level, and as soon as the elevator got to the top, we saw a man wearing full black clothing and a covered face, with his head down, standing at the back of the elevator. We never ran so fast in our lives. I can't imagine what would have happened if we went in that elevator. Mind you, there are only 2 levels that elevator stops at, which are street level and station level, and there were no trains or buses running for another 4+ hours. This was one of the scariest experiences I've gone through, and it still sends shivers down my spine. I was watching my brother play Final Fantasy VI when I was a kid, and I looked in the mirror of our VHS cabinet to see the reflection of a smiling skull with a rusty pipe neck and long downward curved horns coming out of the wall from behind us, near the washing machine. I froze and looked back to see nothing there. I did a triple take and saw the skull and the reflection every time. She screamed bloody murder and ran upstairs crying. I didn't go back downstairs for 4 years. My family was freaked out, but probably assumed I was seeing things. I went back down 4 years later and saw it again. Mom hired some crystal-type hippies to come sage the area. I could still see it. I wanted so badly to trace the outline of the skull on the reflection of the DVD case, have someone erase it and trace it again and again to finally prove something paranormal like that. But the thought of looking at it was absolutely bone-chilling and terrifying, and I just couldn't do it. We sold the DVD case and I never saw it again, even in other mirrors, but every time I see that area in a reflection, my heart stops for a second. I typically don't believe in anything paranormal and have a boring scientific outlook on reality, but those memories always throw me for a loop, even today. I was still in high school living in my childhood home with just me and my grandparents. I was watching 106 in Park after school and standing in front of my bed in my room when I noticed what sounded like feet running fast down the hallway toward my room. No, it was just me and my grandpa, and I wasn't allowed to have pets. I had a childhood dog when I was between the ages of 2 and 10, but he was forced to be an outside dog, and that was my best friend. Anyway, he had passed away a long time ago. At this point, I was maybe 16 or 17. I checked down the hall but couldn't see anything, and something made me look at the floor in front of me. I saw what I can only describe as a black blur, and it pounced on me, and I ended up on my bed terrified. I wasn't hurt at all, I was just scared. To this day, I still have no idea what it was. It very well could have been my past doggo. He was a black half lab, half chow. That's just one story from the creepy old house. Our neighbor had a little disagreement. He evidently hit her a few too many times, and she decided to take a knife to him in the chest while he slept. She dragged his body to the closet, then she walked to the kitchen and turned the burner on high while accidentally knocking over some paper towels or something. Then she remembers that she's out of cigarettes and takes a stroll to the store. The heat from the blaze nearly melted our vinyl siding. Later we watched crime scene techs use a shovel to pry him from the floor in what used to be the closet. Imagine burning chicken skin stuck to a frying pan and having to get under it with your spatula. It was a lot for one evening. I was about 12 and living with my parents. We inherited a rocking chair from someone my mom worked for. My parents put it in the bedroom next to the bathroom, and we could see that the room from the landing one floor up where my parents' bedroom was. My bedroom was next to theirs on the same landing. There were only 3 of us, Mom, Dad, and me. I look over the banister and see Mom rocking in the chair in the bedroom below our landing. I'm saying goodnight to my folks as it's bedtime. I go into my parents' bedroom and my dad's in bed, so I say goodnight to him and ask him where Mom is. He says, oh, she'll be getting ready for bed soon. So I wait on the landing to say goodnight. Mom's in the bedroom on the rocking chair. I tell him I could see the back of her head, so Dad says, oh, she's probably doing a bit of reading before bed then. Then I heard the bathroom door open, and I asked Mom what she was doing in the chair, and she said she was in the bathroom getting ready for bed. It wasn't Mom sitting in the rocking chair. Another story, I'm 19 at the time, and we just moved into our apartment with our first baby, who was running about and difficult to catch to put in his high chair. I asked his dad to feed him breakfast that morning in the front room because I had an appointment early and had to leave. As I was getting ready in my bathroom, I saw in the reflection of the mirror what looked like a blurry image of my toddler running full speed past the doorway as I was looking in the mirror. I start shouting to his dad as I walk into the front room, couldn't you get him in the high chair? I guess I'll have to grab him. But he was sitting fully strapped into the high chair with half his breakfast gone. I told my son's dad that I'd just seen the toddler run past, and that's why I ran in. But his dad said it couldn't have been our toddler, as he'd been sitting in his high chair for a good 20 minutes eating his breakfast.